Today we're going to talk about long I patterns and long O patterns. So long I, there are several ways to make the long I sound. You can have long I at the very beginning of a word, as in ivory. Okay. So if we look at our words, and once again we're going to go by syllables. If you remember, we have ivory, idol, iron. All right. So it's the long I sound there, right? Because it's an open, it's by itself, makes the long I sound. Right. Now if you look at these are two-syllable words: pilot, silent, final. Right. If you break it into syllables, once again, it ends with that I, so therefore it is a long I sound. So pilot. And that first syllable ends with that I, and it's a long I phoneme. Pilot. Silent. Right? Has that long I phoneme. Final. Right? So just plain old I, but depending on where it's positioned in the syllable, can make the long I sound. So it has to be at the very end of the syllable, either by itself or just end of the syllable with a consonant before it. And then let's go through some patterns. The next one is IE. You might recognize this one. Okay. This grapheme also makes a long I phoneme, as in right. And then if you wanted to, we can get into the plural form of word, like okay, I know, and then. But those are the plural forms. But let's look at these. All right. So they end in long I. Tie, lie. So it's IE is the pattern. And then IE is the pattern here because of it, remember, it's Y. And you change the Y to I, and then you added ES. All right. We'll go over this some more in another lesson. So, and then plain old Y at the end. So, if you notice, they all end in the long I phoneme, right, but spelled Y. Defy, Y, shy, July, they all end in the long I sound. Right. You just have to do sight words and just continue to teach these practice. The more the students see these words and see the different spellings and see the different patterns, they will know which pattern to use when they spell it. And then next one, right? So we have, right? Okay. All right, so if we look at these, we have IGH. And if you notice with these three, they all have a T. Okay. And this one doesn't. But this is actually a rule that you can teach your students. When you have a word that ends in, that has a long I sound in the middle of a word, but it ends with that T phoneme, typically, most of the time, it is spelled, the I, long I is spelled IGH. So all three of those letters together make the long I sound. Night, might, tight. All right. When I was a teacher, a lot of my students would frequently misspell this word might like this. Right? They were using the I consonant E pattern, and you can understand why, but I would have to teach them, wait a second, remember, you hear that T at the very end of the word? If you hear the T, therefore, we're going to spell it IGH. All right, so how to help them distinguish with certain words. Obviously, MITE, the little bug, is a different word. All right, so that goes with meaning. But you have to help the students understand the T typically is IGH. So obviously, sight word practice with this, the more familiar they are with seeing it, they'll understand it. So hi. And then you can, with this one, how do I know it's not this or this? You have to do the does it look funny test, all right? And then obviously this one looks the most normal. And this is a completely different word, so be careful with that. So. And then remember, we also have our basic I consonant E, right? Where the E is silent and the I is long, right? And bite. The E is silent and the I is long. So keep that. Nose long I. Right. Long O. Right. So long O has a few patterns. We have O, which we'll talk about, O-A, and O-W. Okay. So long O, most common example, no. Right? So ending, the very end of a syllable, you hear the long O phoneme. It is typically just O. By the way, that dash stands for consonant, consonant O. So whatever consonant and then an O. Okay. All right, does that always work? No. Look at this word. That's not toe, that's two. So, okay. So if we look at the word OA, we have all right, we have boat, soak, foam. All right, long O in the middle of a word. These are all one syllable, right? Spelled O-A together. So we can go back to that funny saying, when two vowels go walking, the first one does the talking. So we say the long O here, not the long A. So soak, foam, boat. Okay, O-W. Now we have to be careful because O-W is also what we call a diphthong. That's going to be another lesson. For today, we're going to focus on how O-W just makes the long O sound. So snow, okay, so we have snow, low, flow, crow. All right, so you see how you can possibly distinguish between when you need to use OA and when you need to use OW. OW is at the very end of a word. Crow, flow, low, snow. So together. And then we do have OE. Okay, toe. All right, and then bow. All right. So obviously sight word practice with this one. All right, the more students see it, the more familiar they become and they know which pattern to use. But once again, two vowels go walking, the first one does the talking. So they're able to focus on long O.